Okay, hi. So today we're going to talk about adaptation and how different organisms adapt to survive. Now, firstly, why do different organisms need to survive? Well, if you think about it, on the planet, there are various different conditions which are very, very different from each other. And obviously, one of those is the desert environment. So a desert environment will be very hot, very dry, and also at night it can get extremely, extremely cold. So you've got extreme temperature there in a desert. You also have things like Arctic conditions, which obviously includes lots of permanent ice, very little wildlife around, so it's almost like a desert but with snow, and so things have to adapt to that. A lot of things live in water. So water environments, that could be fresh water or salt water, obviously depending on whether you're going to live in a lake, a river or the sea, and animals need to adapt to live in one or the other. Often if you have an animal that can live in salt water, it will not be able to live in fresh water and vice versa. Also, especially in salt water, you have very different animals living at different depths. For example, if you go right down to the bottom of the ocean, your regular fish would certainly not be able to survive down there because of the massive amount of pressure and the complete lack of sunlight. And so, what is the purpose of an adaptation? Well, an adaptation will allow an organism to survive. Obviously, the number one is survive, but equally important is reproduction. So to be able to survive and reproduce. Because if you can survive in a given environment but you can't reproduce, then that means that that species will become extinct. Because over time, they will not survive time and they will all die. And so the specific requirements for survival and reproduction will vary between each organism, of course. We, for example, need water. We need oxygen, and we also need a source of food in order to survive. Whereas things like plants, they do need water as well. Do they need oxygen? No, not really. They need carbon dioxide. And do they need food? Well, no, because they make the food, or their food, which is glucose, out of the carbon dioxide and the water. And that is, of course, photosynthesis. But for photosynthesis, they need sunlight. And so, bearing in mind, obviously, we prefer to have sunlight. If we were in the dark all the time, it'd be a bit weird. But a plant will actually die if you put it in the dark because it won't be able to photosynthesize. So they are different things which different organisms need. So on that note, let's take a look at plants in a bit more detail. Should have really done this in green, but let's use a slightly different green. There we go. Plants. So what do plants need? Plants need CO2, which is carbon dioxide. They need H2O, which is water. And they also need light. And that's very important. Now, one special example of a plant which is adapted to survive is an epiphyte. Epiphyte. Now, these plants will live in rainforests, which are very high above ground. So the plants can actually survive high above the ground. They don't have to anchor themselves in the ground. And the way that they do that is they attach themselves to other plants. So let's have a look at a photo of one. Okay, so this here is the epiphyte. So we have the epiphyte here. You can see that it's attached here. It's attached itself to the tree. So it's living above ground, but because it's attached to the tree, it can survive without having roots. Now these spiny leaves, which I've labelled here, so the leaves are specially adapted. And these allow the uptake of water and other nutrients, not from the soil or from this plant. The leaves actually can take it in from the air directly. So they absorb water from the air, and that stops them needing roots. Now you might think, well, why would they bother doing that? Well, you see how small these plants are in comparison to something like a tree. If these were on the ground, the tree would be hogging all the sunlight and these plants wouldn't get any sunlight. But as you can clearly see in this photo, the epiphyte here is high up on the tree, and so it is actually getting loads of the sunlight and out-competing plants which are lower down on the ground. And so that is actually a very useful adaptation for the plant to survive. Now, another plant which has adapted successfully is the water lily. Water lily. You've probably seen these. They have special leaves which have massive air spaces in them. And that makes them a lot less dense than other plants. And this means that they will float on water. So there we go, here's a photo. This water lily is floating on the water because it's not dense at all. So air spaces in the leaves allow it to be less dense and float on the water. This means that because it's not sinking, it can float on the water and easily obtain water from the pond or the lake or wherever it is. But it also means that it's staying up above the water and allowing it to gain sunlight. And so sunlight, CO2 and water are readily available for the water lily. Okay, so finally, let's shuffle these around so we've got room, like so. And like so. There we go. We have what are known as the Extremophiles. Extremophiles. And you know that phile as a suffix just means to love or to like, and the extreme obviously means extreme conditions. So extremophiles are organisms which are able to live and survive in extreme conditions. Many of these things are microorganisms. Microorganisms. And there is a simple reason for this. That's because large animals and plants need to take in a lot of food and a lot of energy, and if you're in an extreme environment it might be quite difficult to come by, and so therefore they will not survive. They also reproduce way quicker than something like a human, and that means that they are able to adapt and mutate quicker. So they can evolve as a species or mutate quicker than a large organism can. And a organism which likes really hot temperatures is known as a thermophile. Thermo just means temperature or heat. Thermophile, so heat loving. Okay, and these are generally bacteria. You can get some algae as well as thermophiles, but generally bacteria. And they are bacteria which often like temperatures above 45 degrees Celsius. So above 45 degrees Celsius, and that can go all the way up to around about 90 degrees Celsius in some cases. And if human beings lived in temperatures above 50 degrees, 60 degrees, we would most likely die. If we were left out in that temperature without shelter or ways to cool us down, we would definitely die. And that is because our body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. And that is to allow our enzymes to function properly. So enzymes, in general, they like body temperature, which is around 37 degrees. Now, thermophiles, they have special enzymes. So the thermophiles enzymes are able to deal with temperatures above. So not just 80, let's just say above the 45 degrees Celsius. Now, enzymes are proteins, and that means that they're proteins which allow reactions to occur faster in their bodies, if you like, or in their cells. They are different to the proteins that we have to allow reactions to occur. And so they will not denature. Will not denature. If you this crosses over in chemistry as well, where we spoke about enzymes denaturing. An enzyme is basically a biological catalyst. It is a protein which will allow our reactions in our body to occur faster. But if that protein is subject to a very high temperature, so in our case, over 37 degrees in general will start to denature proteins. So our enzymes will denature. And that is why a thermophile can survive above 45 degrees, and we can't really. Now that's just one example of an extremophile. There are various others. Some of them can deal with very salty conditions. So they could be salt-loving. They're known as salophiles. Some of them also like very low temperatures. So low temperatures. And so there are various different organisms which can survive in the most extreme, harsh conditions in the world, and normally those are the microorganisms. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. That was just a quick overview of what adaptation is and a few examples of when that has happened. If you would like to ask any questions, then please feel free to comment in the box below or send me an email using the link, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.